You know, I wonder if this is gonna be good.
What is up, DC fans? Welcome back to my channel. Wonder Woman 1984 is finally here. At least it's close, dropping on HBO Max and in theaters Christmas Day. Thank you to Warner Brothers for sending me this screener. I cannot wait to talk about it. I need your comments down below. This is a spoiler-free review, so no spoilers. Let's do it. So, Wonder Woman comes into conflict with the Soviet Union during the Cold War in the 1980s and finds a formidable foe by the name of Cheetah. By the way, if you guys like these reviews and you want more DC content, drop this video a thumbs up. The hype for Wonder Woman 1984 was real, and I went into this movie with some pretty high expectations, even though after so many changes in the release date, I sat back and said, I just want the movie to come out already. But that's how I feel about most things nowadays. And I want to start with those expectations. I think everyone is going to go into the sequel wanting it to be better than the original, even though the first Wonder Woman is one of my favorite movies in the DCEU. I had a great time with that first film. You have the fish out of water story, you have kind of that dark and grittiness that the rest of the DCEU had, but something about Patty Jenkins' direction in that film worked so well. Well, this movie is completely different, tonally, story-wise, and even scale-wise. The grand epicness of this movie seems to be overwhelming compared to the first, because while the third act of that film was epic, most of the story is smaller and more subtle. So the word I'm going to use for 1984 is a word you're going to see a lot of people use, and that is ambitious, right? This film swings for the fences in every single act. All three acts are distinctly different. I do believe that maybe two of those three acts went on a bit too long. The movie as a whole, it's 2.5 hours. I could have done with 2 hours on the dot, right? There's a bit of story, there's a bit of filler in here that we didn't necessarily need to get us to where we were going. But by the time we get to that grand spectacle of a finale, I was thoroughly enjoying myself, as I was through most of the film. I had a good time with this movie, but when you start to play the comparison game with the first drastically different film, of course, I think that's where a lot of people will walk out disappointed, because it's so different, and not everyone will be used to the kind of movie that we're getting here. This very much harkens back to something like the original Superman with Christopher Reeve, right? The tagline there was, "You'll believe a man can fly," and it had that uplifting, heartfelt feel that you don't often see in superhero movies nowadays. Now, we get some great superhero movies nowadays, but they don't always go for that, right? Patty Jenkins definitely goes for that here, and she brings the Wonder Woman lore to life and almost the cheesiness of the character to the big screen, because there are those moments that a lot of people would consider kind of wacky, a little bit overboard in this movie. You're going to have to take believability and kind of leave it at the door going into this film. Suspension of disbelief, and that's fine, right? It's Wonder Woman. She has a magical lasso superpowers, and she fights a cheetah in this movie. But I'm talking the more subtle details. There are certain character moments and just things that happen that I didn't necessarily buy all the way. And I know these things sound like nitpicks, but I feel like they're going to bother a handful of people. And many are going to walk out saying, well, because that wasn't as good as the first, it means it was a bad movie. And I don't think that's the case, right? There's so much entertainment to be had with this film. You start with the development from Pedro Pascal, Maxwell Lord. I do think there was a bit more to be had there, because he starts out as this really fleshed out character in the first act, and they give him a bit of a backstory. They give him something to allow us to relate to him too, and I'm like, this is genuinely a good villain. And then in the second, I'll say the final hour of the film, we don't lose that, but he just goes on this path where we kind of stop learning about him, and it's more so for the sake of the plot. And that's absolutely fine, because up to that point, I was really relating with this character. But I feel that way about a lot of ththese characters. Cheetah, Kristen Wiig actually did a really good job. That was the one thing I was slightly nervous about. But Cheetah didn't quite get the development that I needed. Now, as a whole, I think the villains work. They definitely serve their purpose towards the end. They provide Wonder Woman with an extremely difficult set of tasks in that third act, but they also make Wonder Woman vulnerable in a different way in this movie. And we often see this in superhero films with these overpowered superheroes, right? You have to find a way to make them vulnerable, and they do a really good job of that. It's convincing. Also, Chris Pine, Steve Trevor, you had to make me believe that he's back for a reason, and that reason is, at least I thought, explained fairly well, and I bought that, right? You understand why all of these major events are happening. Now, are there too many events throughout the movie? Maybe. There's a lot going on, and I don't think the focus was there at a point. We also go about 45 minutes without seeing Wonder Woman, and I don't think that's a major issue because you're getting that character development in, but personal preference, I wanted to see Wonder Woman. Once we finally get her back in costume and she's fighting crime, I loved it. I mean, we get some grand scale action sequences here that are great. A nice use of slow-mo. Sometimes you can overdo it. I thought it looked wonderful because... And the entire time, we're dealing with something so different in this film from what I expected. And I'm trying to tiptoe around spoilers here. We all go about life sometimes wanting things that we can't have. And that's okay, right? But sometimes we let selfishness get in the way, and we affect those around us in a very negative fashion to get what we want. And that's kind of the motivation for certain characters in this movie. And that is basically what this story comes down to, especially in the third act. And on a massive scale, and I know what I'm describing kind of sounds random, but you'll know when you see the movie. And that idea is something that I believe Patty Jenkins was trying to get across. Now, maybe a few things could have been tweaked to simplify that a bit, but I think the overall idea of that is really well done. And then there's this heartfelt, again, ambitious moment at the end that I thought worked extremely well. Now, again, believability, you're going to have to kind of leave that at the door. But the idea of it, I think, is really important, especially in 2020. And I know what you're thinking. It's not a political thing. It's not something that she shoehorned in there. It's just this level of humanity showcased in the third act. And the idea of it is so beautiful. And again, that Christopher Reeve Superman comparison, that hope that you have while watching this character back then for the first time on screen, well, it almost feels like that at times with this Wonder Woman movie because there are so many powerful, grand, visual, colorful, I thought the color correction in this movie was spectacular, moments with Wonder Woman. One in particular, you're going to be saying, wow, like this is like inspiring, and I loved it. And that's what makes this movie special, in my opinion. If you're asking me, no, I don't think this Wonder Woman was as good as the first. And it's missing some of those grittier elements that made a few scenes like No Man's Land spectacular in the first film. But I do think there is a bit of consistency here, and that bright, uplifting, colorful tone works extremely well for the character of Wonder Woman. So I respect the fact that Patty Jenkins went a different route. In terms of it tying into the DCEU, I do think that that's one thing that fans are going to have an issue with here. It reminds me of how some of the X-Men movies just said, yeah, we're going to forget about that and do our own thing. So yeah, I definitely had a few questions there. Wonder Woman 1984 has this uplifting feel to it that we rarely see in superhero movies today. The overall story definitely needed a bit more, but it had the right intentions. The film features beautiful sequences, touching character moments, and a stunning performance from Wonder Woman herself. She slowly gets better through the movie, and by the time you get to the end, she reminds you of why you love her so much. Also, Hans Zimmer's score is epic in this film. We get a few music cues from other movies, but his Wonder Woman theme song is done in this cinematic way that adds so much to what we already love about it. Okay, I need to give you guys my score. That is a 70% for this sequel. Still didn't love it as much as the first. I just think certain things work better about the first movie, and the ambitions here are so lofty. But hey, at least they went for it. They swung for the fences. I need you guys letting me know, are you seeing this in the theater on HBO Max? When are you seeing it? And who is your favorite DC character? I have to figure out my favorite DCEU movie, because that tier list is coming soon. Gonna go work on it right now.